One of the reasons why San Antonio is doing so well on this issue is because we have taken the time to brief people who are running for office that represent San Antonians about tech equity and telecommunication policy issues. Whenever somebody runs for office, regardless of their political party affiliation, I say, I want to talk to you about digital inclusion.
Welcome to another episode of the Community Broadband Bits podcast. I'm Christopher Mitchell at the Institute for Local Self-Reliance in St. Paul, Minnesota. And it's been a little while since I said that because we'd recorded a bunch of episodes and then did a little traveling, got the team together out here, and now we're back. We're recording more shows. And today we're back with Deanne Cuellar, who is the State Director for OATS, which is the Older Adults Technology Services, which is a wonderful group working on digital inclusion efforts. Welcome to the show, Deanne.
Thanks for having me.
This is exciting because I don't know if people realize it, but you're in San Antonio. You've been in San Antonio in a variety of positions, both working for the city government, nonprofits, and thinking a lot about digital inclusion, how to make sure everyone can take advantage of the internet, everyone has access to it, stuff like that. And San Antonio has quietly become a leader. I think it's not only is it one of the largest cities in America, but like of the top 100 cities in population in the United States, almost none of them have anything even close to what San Antonio is doing around broadband. And so we're going to talk about how that came to be and what it is. But you want to tell us a little bit about OATS first, and then we'll talk about what San Antonio just announced?
Older Adults Technology Services from AARP, which is our full name, is our nonprofit organization, and Senior Planet is one of our popular flagship programs. And our mission, to shorten it, is that we work at the intersection of aging and technology. And we currently work on all three legs of the stool as it relates to digital divide.
Excellent. Those three legs are?
The ownership of a high quality device, a certain level of digital literacy, and also access to free or affordable high-speed internet.
Excellent. The three-legged stool, which every now and then someone wants to put a fourth leg on it, but then it's just a chair. And I feel like we should stick with the stool.
Stick with the stool.
Absolutely. So and I want to be careful when I talk about San Antonio. Sometimes I'm talking about just the city. And I feel like sometimes we're talking about the county, which is it Bexar? I'm trying to remember now. What's the county?
It's Bexar County, Bear. Yeah. I think there's a lot of words in Texas that don't make sense to people outside Texas, but we have a lot of influence from the German community, but it's Bexar.
Okay. What just happened in September? What was the announcement a few weeks ago?
The announcement a few weeks ago was that several years of a collective impact model resulted in SA Digital Connects. There used to be a handful of tech equity and digital inclusion advocates that worked on closing the digital divide in Bexar County. Bexar County is the county, the city of San Antonio is inside the county. And then, a few years ago, the Digital Inclusion Alliance, formed. So we had a San Antonio Digital Inclusion Alliance that brought together a group of stakeholders. Then Mayor Ron Nirenberg formed an Innovation Technology Committee and appointed a Digital Inclusion Liaison. And I got to serve in that role from beginning to end. Several policy and funding priority meetings and hearings took place officially at the city and the county level, but they also took place at the community level. And then the ecosystem expanded and more partners came in from the city and the county and the nonprofit world and the corporate world. Some professional help was made available. So we made a huge investment in coordinating these efforts. We put the funding there, and a lot of best in field initiatives popped up before the pandemic, during the pandemic, and also still ongoing in the pandemic. And that resulted in a 300-page plus digital inclusion roadmap, probably one of the largest of its kind in the country.
Now, the way you described it, it makes it almost seem like it was destined to happen. And of course, this is just what happens, but it hasn't happened anywhere else. So what made Bexar County, able to move in this direction?
I think a lot of things happened that could be replicated across geographies here in the United States. One, the city of San Antonio adopted racial equity work, as a priority. We were going to do racial equity work. Like the council decided that was something we were going to work on. And digital inclusion falls under racial equity work. The city of San Antonio also has what they call an equity atlas. So you can go online and look at overlays of data sets that point you in the directions of the city where there are infrastructure, ails that we need to address ASAP. Then I think also something that was unique to the city of San Antonio is there's a lot of people who care about this issue here. Not just myself. There are people like Jordana Barton and Mooney Ray Jester, who also are San Antonians. The list is long. And so I think that the amount of people who came together to care about this issue, which you see in other movement building work, was a catalyst for us, putting our heads together and doing the work. And it happened. It's a beautiful thing.
Let's go back to the last time I was in Texas with you when I visited San Antonio. And at that point, you were working for Councilmember Osuna, right? What was happening back then? Is that even the middle of the story? Or is that closer to the beginning?
The story I tell is I was actually in Washington, D.C. with people like you and Harold Feld and Malkia Cyril, and we were schlepping to work on all the things, to close the digital divide, for media justice, a long list of telecommunication policies. And a cybersecurity professional named Leticia Ozuna called me and she said, "You talked about there being a municipal broadband network in San Antonio. Is that true?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Are we using it the way that we should be using it?" And I said, "We could be doing more." And she said, "Well, I think I might become the next city councilwoman for District 3. If I do, would you come work with me and let's see what we can do?" And I said, "Sure." And sure enough, like several days later, I was on my way back to San Antonio and working for Councilwoman Ozuna. And we put our heads together and we sat down with different people at the city. And we said, what can we do within the law with the municipal broadband network? And we just, gave it the language to talk about it. And that resulted in the San Antonio area broadband network paper. And it's a short, maybe like 1 to 3 page white paper that says, here's some things we can try. Several years later, that's another reason why the city of San Antonio has broadband access at most, if not all, city and county owned buildings, hundreds of Wi-Fi access points in public parks, and also our Via Metropolitan Transit system is also connected to that. So that if you ride the bus and you're on a long trip for 45 minutes, you have access to the internet. And the cool thing about the buses was that during the pandemic, in those neighborhoods that still have connectivity issues, those buses were able to go out in the community and be a part of the resiliency of trying to keep people connected during the pandemic.
The community network, the municipal network in San Antonio is something that people may not be familiar with because it's primarily for what we call like institutional anchors. And I think that's the way it was back then, right? I mean, I remember, and this is a network that's owned by the city's electric utility, which the city owns, CPS, and they had fiber in a whole bunch of places. And my sense was that there was a reluctance at that time to do too much, not because they would actually be violating the state law, but because they didn't want to be perceived as violating the state law, which is ultimately one of the bigger problems with these laws, is that they cast a bigger shadow than they should because people don't do things they're allowed to do, even though they're allowed to do them, because they feel like maybe I'll get in trouble because I'm getting too close to that line. At least that's my sense.
I think when that beautiful community asset was built, it was a different time in Texas as it relates to Public Utility Commission laws and policies. Mm-hmm. And it was seen as a major investment, and what they were going to use it for was, still being conceptualized. I believe it was built in the early 90s is when that dark fiber throughout the city was set out. And then fast forward, different bills started making their way through the Texas legislature that were spearheaded by some of the largest telecommunication companies in the country. And so the rules, I would call them like a patchwork. They flexed up and down, and adoption was still early, right? Or the adoption of the internet was still early. So I think what ended up happening is someone like Councilwoman Zuna was also in her seat at a time when Julian Castro was also mayor. And what we know about Julian Castro is that he's a pretty innovative thinker, willing to try new things. And he was one of the people who signed on to thinking about what we could do more with that network. And so there were other council members too. So time, right time, right place is what happened, and really set the ground for trying to be more creative with that community asset.
And one of the things that I'm fascinated by is I'm wondering about your emotional state, like maybe 6 months or a year after the paper comes out. because I feel like at that time, you don't know that you've helped to set in motion things that are going to result in really impressive connectivity, better planning, better resources for people throughout the community. I'm curious if 6 months after the short paper was published, did you feel like a frustration, like you were missing opportunities and that sort of thing? Or was there always just this sense of we're going to get this done?
I think being in that position was stressful from beginning to end, because from the beginning until the end, people were always telling us what we could not do. There was not a lot of willingness. That's what we called it at the time. I remember us saying there is an unwillingness to collaborating and coordinating or even trying. And we had to push through a lot of that unwillingness as to Latinx women in technology, which also at the time, very few of us, several years ago, and really had to put our foot down and say, we want to try. We want to try to see if this works. And if it doesn't, then it doesn't. But if we want at least the opportunity to try and fail. And that's what we did, is we moved forward. And I think at the time, the very first anchor institution that signed on to support us was in Texas A&M University, which was a pretty great partner to have in alignment with us. And then over time, as the paper got out, there were a lot of people like in the background saying, you're going to get sued, and just always kind of looking over your shoulder. And there were no lawsuits. None of us got sued. The city did not get sued. And there's some really talented people in policy that actually work at CPS and the city. And through their expertise, they walked us through the legalities of being able to conceptualize some of those projects.
And that, I think, is good to hear, because I hear from people in other states that have laws as well, that they've just been convinced that they cannot do anything because of this supposed lawsuit. I don't want to belittle the threat of a lawsuit, because cities really don't like to waste their efforts in the courts when they could be benefiting people. But we can't be intimidated either, right? So what happens next? So the paper's out there circulating. Texas A&M signs on. What else is happening? I mean, this to me also seems like it's a focus on kind of making sure the infrastructure's out there. Does the work on digital inclusion and the other legs of the stool, is that happening in parallel, or how does that develop?
I think that those of us who work on this issue are a little bit at a crossroads. Before the pandemic, this felt like a really lonely space. And one positive result of the pandemic is that the field has just busted open. There's, Office of Innovation, digital inclusion, there's all these jobs popping up all over the country to do this work. And even here in San Antonio, like that table has grown. They had to build a bigger table. But I think now, one is that how do we follow through on the plans? Two, how do we show those results to the community, which is what I advocate here locally, is this plan is great, but how does the community see the results? How are we going to visualize that something's actually happening? Three, how do we ensure that a lot of these resources that are being talked about at the state and federal level actually make their way to San Antonio so these projects can be completed? And I think the part that we kind of have, for the lack of better words, a pain point or a blind spot is how do we follow through with those projects with digital resiliency, which is kind of a new term that's coming around now, right? These remedies have to be built in a way that can adapt with the community as the community grows, and also keeps the community safe, because they deserve privacy and protections. So there's still a lot to do, even though a lot has been done.
Yes, I have no doubt about that. There's I feel like this work in this space is always like hiking, when you're like going up a hill and you feel like you see the top, and you get to the top just to see the next ridge line, and still going up.
Yep. No, that's a great way to think about it, because I describe it as, working on tech equity is like using an ice pick to make ice, but chipping away at a glacier.
Yeah, I think I like mine better. So. So let's talk about the infrastructure piece of it then. So the city has Texas A&M signs up. The city gets more bold over time, it seems like. Is that right?
I actually used that word recently to describe the city. I agree. I think the city is getting bolder. I think that could be attributed to the leadership like who's the mayor and who's the city council. We have a pretty progressive looking, city council right now. There's also younger council members on there. There's older council members. And I think that the willingness of the people that represent us matters on how fast or how slow these solutions are going to unfold.
Now, one of the reasons I think you have that leadership is because you've helped a lot of organizations plug in. I think in a lot of cities, you have organizations that may not be technologically oriented, who serve a community that desperately needs better broadband access. It's an open secret. Everyone knows it, but they don't really know how to plug in. Would you say that one of the secrets of San Antonio is helping those groups figure out how to plug in?
Yes, I think that one of the reasons why San Antonio is doing so well on this issue is because we have taken the time to brief people who are running for office at the local, state, and national level that represent San Antonians about tech equity and telecommunication policy issues. I can count myself for sure. I can speak for myself that whenever somebody runs for office, regardless of their political party affiliation, I say, I want to talk to you about digital inclusion. And they think it's just the three legs of the stool, but I really want to go deep with them because I want to support people who are going to advance the right policies and the right funding, to work myself out of a job.
It's something that you've incorporated into the jobs that you're doing, because this predates your time with Oates.
It's always been my goal to be able to walk away from this issue. It's like the job is done. I don't know how other people work on this issue, but for me, I don't want to be 80 years old saying we haven't done enough. I really want to be able to say we did a great job. I want to connect every San Antonian. I don't know how to do it, but that's what my goal is. My personal goal is.
Yes. And it's reachable. I mean, we did that with telephone. We did it with electricity. We did it with water systems. We can get there to where everybody has fair access to internet access and confidence to know how to use it.
Yeah, I think that if I could just say one thing about working at Oates and Senior Planet is when I got to meet Dr. Thomas Camber and Kim Harris, the reason why I was attracted to that program was because I got to work on all three legs of the stool, and it was a program that I could do right now. Right? It's not something that I had to plan for. I could stand up that program pretty quickly and know that I was chipping away at my iceberg with my community. And, Senior Planet San Antonio has reached over 34,000 seniors since the program's been around. That's a big number for a digital inclusion program of its kind. It's a big number because numbers matter. And so we've measured, loneliness and, whether or not people feel connected. And so I'm really proud to have been able to have met the Oates family.
Would you say that work, which I sort of think of as, if we think of the emergency broadband benefit as being something that came along, like the work you did before that is kind of being pre-work, that you're able to take greater advantage of that program because you had all these connections and everything?
Yeah, I mean, the good thing about being able to work with the talented people at Oates was knowing that there were people in the curriculum team that could distill the emergency broadband program, into a curriculum so that it could go out into the community so that the community can actually apply for a federal subsidy. That work, isn't easy to do. And so I think that is another plus of being a part of an organization that understands all three legs of the stool. And if you go look at the agingconnected.org website, it explains why we're working on this issue. Why is Oates, working on closing the digital divide?
Excellent. So let me just ask, how did the county get involved in this? And I'm curious in part because I'm always entertained by the counties in which there's a lot of friction between a powerful city within the county and the county itself. But in this case, it seems like the county and the city work together pretty well.
Well, I can't speak for the county and the city on whether or not they work together well. On the outside looking in, I would say that they do because I'm a constituent, so I can only talk about what I see. I think again the same answer for the council is the leadership. So our commissioners and the judge that lead the county over the last 30 years have been people that care about this issue. Judge Wolf, who is retiring, is 80 years old. He's been serving in that role, I think, 20 to 30 years. He opened the bibliotech, which that's another great digital inclusion asset that we have in the community. That was a public-private partnership to get digital literacy out into the community. There was also Commissioner Wolf, who I shared with you that article that, several years ago, you would think a more conservative leader would not have those policy priorities for closing the divide, but like this commissioner knew what the issue was and knew how to write about it and talk about it in a way that persuaded more people to the issue, which is always a plus. So I think it comes back down to the people that we elected to represent us on this issue.
What I come back to is is that just luck? I mean, is it just like luck that Dallas didn't have those people and that San Antonio did, or did they emerge from a specific set of circumstances that people helped to craft?
No, I don't think it's luck. And there are people who write about civic engagement in San Antonio and study it here and write books about it. But San Antonio has a history of civic engagement that goes back to the 1900s, to the pecan shellers, to an organization like the Esperanza Peace and Justice Center fighting for water, preserving, housing and historical buildings. Like if anybody who spends any amount of time in San Antonio will run into a community activist, and people who are involved in advocacy don't think activism is a bad word here. People are proud to be advocates for issues. So it doesn't take really long. You could come to San Antonio today, find a local restaurant, and you'll run into somebody who works on some issue. And I think that history of being so involved with our community is what's led to us working on some of the biggest issues that affect our community.
And I want to ask, what is a bibliotech?
Bibliotech is what has a physical location. They have physical locations, but it's where people can go to, try out the latest devices and hardware. And I would have to look it up, but it has a digital library where you can download one of the biggest digital libraries onto your phone or tablet or other device, and it's available at no cost to every San Antonian.
That's cool.
It's very cool.
So, is there anything else that I missed that we should cover? What are some of the concrete things that we're going to see San Antonio doing in coming years to make sure that everyone's well connected?
I think those of us who work on tech equity and digital inclusion and closing the digital divide are going to spend some time now going outside of our community to talk about how we did what we did. And I'm not just talking about myself. I think that the Office of Innovation at the City of San Antonio, you'll see those names popping up on GovTech panels, across the country, because I believe municipalities are going to want to know, how did you move the needle? And I think that they should. I think that some people that are in the tech community that have joined to work on this issue, you'll also see their names, popping up, at conferences and summits. So I think that the names of the people who are working on this issue are going to start springing up all over the place. And what I hope that results in people coming to the city of San Antonio to work with us on this issue. I hope that, results in not just the federal resources, but private resources that can come to the city of San Antonio. Maybe this could be like a testing ground, for some of these concepts, like a real digital inclusion lab of trying and failing on some of these issues. And I hope it also encourages people to move here. And the social justice activist in me really hopes at the end of the day that it amplifies the stories of San Antonio that need to get out to attract those resources. So that's that's what my hopes and dreams are for some of this.
And that was going to be my last question, but you said something twice now that I want to just prompt you on, and that is try and fail. And you'd mentioned earlier that Leticia Osuna had said, let's try this, even if we fail. Why aren't you afraid of failure? Most of us are really afraid of failure, and you seem to be embracing that you might be failing at some of this stuff.
I don't know if this word makes sense, but I believe that there is glamour in failure. I think it's more attractive to try and see if something works than to not try at all. It's, that's how my mind works, is that I actually feel something physically from not being able to try. And Councilwoman Ozuna was similar, that, she could put something in front of her. And again, also, I want to give credit to the mayor at the time, Julian Castro. You could put something in front of her, and if it was pragmatic and it was viable, then they, as policymakers, were willing to try. And I think that there's two things. When I'm on the outside looking into other communities that are doing this work, I see two things. I see that the unwillingness to try and fail, and I also see that there is a lack of building trust in local communities. And so I think you need both. And one thing that I think was successful in San Antonio that you'll see in that digital inclusion roadmap is that we point out the trust part. And that is something that comes from movement building work. If you study people like Adrienne Marie Brown and emergent strategy, or the best and worst practices of relational organizing with Stacey Abrams, is that you can only move these big ideas at the speed of trust. And so that trust is basically AKA grassroots organizing, is really getting in there and rolling up your sleeves and doing that hard step-by-step field work.
Excellent. I feel like there's a joke in there about the wallpaper on your computer being the Hindenburg crashing into the Titanic, but now there's such a good answer that was like, I can't use it.
I know. I mean, well, it's also, back to the thing what we were talking about, lawsuits, right? Like that's every day. Like, I feel like it used to be whenever you worked on telecom policy or technology, the threat of lawsuits would, make the hair stick up on the, side of your neck or something. But now it's like, that just seems like the go-to top line messaging for thwarting efforts of advancement across sectors, right? You might get sued. And it's like, oh, will you? I mean, like, because there's all of these things popping up across the country, and there's threats of lawsuits, but there's not really any lawsuits, those kinds of lawsuits, happening. And I don't think that's ever going to go away. But I think that, like, the people who work on this issue have become a little bit more like, resilient, to that threat of not even trying. Mm-hmm. These are difficult conversations to have.
Yes. No. And I've talked with people from other large cities across the United States, and there's this fear, and you're right. There's a lack of trust. And I think, without even me having to suggest it, you've really provided a strong reason that people should consider moving to San Antonio if they're relocating. It sounds like a wonderful place. In a lot of ways.
Yeah. I mean, if anybody here in San Antonio wants to put me in charge of convincing people to move here, I would do a great job. Well, I mean, tacos. I mean, that's the number one reason, to move here. It's tacos.
All right. Well, next time I come down, I know what I'll be eating.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Deanne.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome.
We have transcripts for this and other podcasts available at muninetworks.org/broadbandbits. Email us at podcast@muninetworks.org with your ideas for the show. Follow Chris on Twitter. His handle is @CommunityNets. Follow muninetworks.org stories on Twitter. The handle's @muninetworks. Subscribe to this and other podcasts from ILSR, including Building Local Power, Local Energy Rules, and the Composting for Community podcast. You can access them anywhere you get your podcasts. You can catch the latest important research from all of our initiatives if you subscribe to our monthly newsletter at ilsr.org. While you're there, please take a moment to donate. Your support in any amount keeps us going. Thank you to Arnie Hughesby for the song Warm Duck Shuffle, licensed through Creative Commons. This was the Community Broadband Bits podcast. Thanks for listening.